What's up, YouTube? So I caught up with a producer by the name of Inner State, who actually happens to be the producer behind SounDirective. And for those who aren't following, SounDirective are the ones behind that preset bank, which I featured in my last live stream. Well, I think it was my last one, but yeah. I featured their preset bank in my live stream, and it was pretty popular. So yeah, I figured I'd have Inner State on the show. You guys seem to enjoy this kind of podcasty type thing. So yeah, let's dive in and have a look.
Information is only one part of it. My personal opinion is it's not the information that will make the difference. Like, we can pretend that you can transfer everything that you've learned throughout the years into someone that's starting now. The key, I don't think the result can ever be the same, because there is one key factor that cannot be transferred or learned, which is the experience.
Absolutely.
And that experience, it cannot be described, it cannot be passed on. There is no shortcut to experience. How are you?
Yeah,
slept good.
yeah, I had a nice rest. A couple of cups of coffee, so I'm good to go.
Me, I'm on my second one as well. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm an early riser. I wake up like 5:45 usually, like till I organize my day, get the little one ready for school and all that,
I find like my most creative time is like early in the morning.
I know exactly what you mean. The first like 3-4 hours of the day, you can get the whole day, going with that.
Absolutely. So are you also full-time in production and sound and that kind of thing?
Yes.
Awesome.
Full-time.
Awesome.
I used to, that was not my full-time job. I'm actually a woodwind instrument technician. So I repair, and I used to have a workshop. I was repairing and selling woodwind instruments, flutes, clarinets, oboes, saxophones, stuff like that. But I used to, like, the music production was like on the side, like as a parallel thing, like a hobby, which sort of grew year after year after year. And sort of when the financial crisis came, like 2008, 2009, like all these music academies and everything sort of collapsed because people were started to lose their jobs and everything. So my music was a good enough level in order to sustain myself out of that. So I kind of closed my shop and then moved on to production, and I stayed into it ever since.
That's super interesting. So do you play woodwind instruments as well, or?
Yeah. I play the flute. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, that's interesting. Super
I
technical.
got like musical studies background, like classical studies. In music.
That's crazy. I can actually hear a bit of a kind of an influence from the wind side of things in your packs, because they're very atmospheric. They're very almost organic sounding.
I don't know whether that it's nothing intentional. I don't know whether it actually comes out of me, naturally or not. But it's nothing like I intend to do something like that. Maybe it's so into me that it comes out as a natural sort of side of me to make this kind of sounds.
Well, I think that's interesting. It's generally it is something that might not be intentional, but it will always shine through in a person's music where their kind of backgrounds and stuff are. For me, my sort of first introduction to music was playing drums as a kid. So a lot of my stuff is more rhythmical based and that kind of stuff, as opposed to like I can tell your stuff is very tonal and very sort of spacey and organic, which is sort of an element of
it comes natural, man. I mean, if you've practiced everything, if you've practiced something thousands and thousands of times, I think you have the tendency to sort of feel it more. How should I say? More known to you, more close to you. So that for sure comes out more naturally into the music as well. I saw you did the other video with the drumsticks.
Yeah, that was super interesting. Like for me, it's
how much are these? How much did you get them for? How much are these?
I think it's the retail price for just the drumsticks is like $160, but they're doing a special at the moment for like $130 or something. So it's
and you can assign whatever drum sounds you like, I guess. So it's like only the MIDI kind of.
yeah. So the package, like as it comes, it doesn't have a Bluetooth adapter to plug it into your computer, but I mean, you can get a Bluetooth, a little dongle. I haven't actually tested it with it, but it worked with all of the apps that I tried it with on my phone. So I'm pretty sure it's generic MIDI and it should work with VSTs and stuff like that.
Is it natural feeling, or you have to sort of try it and like make sudden moves in order for the sound to come out?
Well, funnily enough, I also worked in a music store before I got into production, but more in the retail side of things. So I was selling musical instruments in a shop, and there was a lot of this kind of thing. There was obviously like Roland electric drums, like the professional ones that feel like drum kits and stuff like that. And those are like, they're more expensive than acoustic drum kits, And then there was a lot of stuff trying to get at this entry-level market, but there was like too much latency because they were using a webcam to detect where the sticks were and that kind of thing, or they didn't have like feedback, so it doesn't vibrate when you hit the thing and stuff like that. So they always kind of missed the mark a little bit. So this thing is a little bit confusing at first because you're just hitting into the middle of nowhere. But if you kind of just close your eyes and focus a little bit, it becomes natural, if you know what I mean. Okay. So it was the most fun I've had on one of those kind of like systems in a very long time. But I mean, I hadn't played drums in many, many years. I sold my drum kit to start buying my first pair of monitors, in fact. So, and ever since...
I hope you didn't regret it.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It felt like the natural progression for me because I'd kind of always... I was also into piano a little bit as a kid. So I've always been into like writing, like composing and writing full things as opposed to just playing an instrument and stuff. So when I would play drums, I would just like record myself and then put a piano over it and that kind of thing, as opposed to trying to learn the drum techniques and stuff. So for myself now as a producer, seeing this thing and not having to buy, like I don't have space in my studio for an electric drum kit and stuff, or, if I'm traveling, just a small thing like that is just so convenient and so fun.
Yeah, it is. I think, what's his name? Claudinho, some Brazilian. I think he's using some kind of that in the live, in his live stage appearance.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. I think he's got like, I don't know, especially during the breaks, he's like coming in front of the stage and like doing all the drum things, to build up the tension and everything. I think it's Claudinho. Yeah.
I've seen him, but I didn't actually know he's using a similar thing. I'll check that out. That's super interesting because that's kind of like, when I first saw it, I was like, it's not my thing. I don't play drums anymore kind of thing. But then I thought, wait, if I could trigger synths, like squelches and zaps and that kind of thing, then maybe it's super cool for a live set. You just have a kick and bass going and trigger a sound every now and then.
Absolutely.
Job's done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I mean, I was actually, my first question I was going to ask, how you got into music production and stuff like that. But you kind of answered that question with regards to, having the woodwind shop and stuff like that.
Well, that was the part of actually being within the music in general. That was becoming a Psytrance producer was never into my realm of dreams. So I didn't even know the existence of this music until I came first in contact with it. I actually came in contact with it during my studies in the UK, where I was actually studying about the musical instruments thing. So sort of started going to parties and then got hooked to it. I'm guessing a lot of people got hooked to it the same way, just going to a few parties and feeling so nice there. So you say, I'm going to follow that genre. So I started going into parties there, like heavily going into parties during my studying years. That was in the 1999 to 2002 era. Then I came back to Greece after I finished my studies and sort of started getting slowly into DJing. And then I got a pair of CDJs to start practicing at home. So one thing led to the other. I got connected to the local Psytrance scene here through the parties and everything. So eventually I started playing a few gigs as a DJ first. And then I entered Spin Twist Records as a DJ first, In between, I started also organizing a few parties, so I came to meet in person a lot of artists that were coming to Greece to play in other gigs at the moment. So one thing led to the other. I met a few artists, and then they started showing me a few tricks here and there in Cubase because I would be closer to them. So I had like the privilege to get first-hand knowledge from them directly. So this and that, I jumped from being a DJ to start doing my own productions. So after a couple of years in Spin Twist Record, I started producing my own tracks as Inner State. I had a couple of releases there in Spin Twist Record. Then I moved to Inon Music, where I stayed for, I think, about 10 years. From that point on, I released 2 albums there and a lot of EPs and singles. And my first album was in 2011 called Terraforma in Inon Music, and the other one was Modus Operandi, which was also in Inon Music in 2015. 2015. Then in the last years, I joined Tech Safari Records, which is a Canadian label, relatively new, but really, really good productions and really good names in it. And since last year, November, I kind of withdrew from the music production scene. I felt like sort of my personal cycle, quote unquote, was kind of complete. I did feel complete with all the things that I gave and took from the scene. And, with the many years in the scene, traveling and all that, you're getting older as well. So physically, you cannot correspond with at the same level, while growing up. So I sort of found another drive, personal drive, which was into the sample creation. So, which is, of course, totally relative to the music production, but I sort of found a new hype for me, a new page for me, for my creation personal process. So I started creating a few samples, and then I decided to open SounDirective. And from last year, I'm focusing mainly on the sound creation and sound design and creating sample packs and preset packs and focusing on that.
I think it's super interesting. You said you also started kind of getting more into the production side of things in like the early 2000s. And, if I think back to that era, there was no way of learning production except by having a step in the door, somebody else showing you the ropes and that kind of thing. And if you fast forward to this era today, the barrier of entry is so much lower because of, guys like yourself and like myself who are making tutorials and who are making sound banks for people to try. So I feel like it's super interesting, whereas back in the day, 2 decades ago, you kind of had to be a DJ or you had to have a step in the door before getting into the production side of things. But now I'm seeing a lot more guys stepping into it. Their first sort of foray into Psytrance is as a producer. And I think for the ones who have, like you said, felt like we've done our cycle, moving into, the tutorials and the sound bank side of things, it's like empowering the new guys who don't have that step in the door and stuff like that, which I think is amazing.
Well, in my opinion, looking back at those days, first of all, the technological means of getting the information had nothing to do with nowadays. Like the internet was totally new at that point. The DAWs at that point were totally different than what they are now. The possibilities, the instruments, everything was totally different. So back in those days, getting information about production was like a dream. Getting tracks was a dream. Like getting unreleased tracks was even a dream at that point. You had to actually physically meet in person a few artists, and like after talks and being friends with them, you would have the courage to actually ask for something unreleased. While nowadays it's like the music has been circulated a lot more easily. Of course, the parties are a lot more. The DJs are a lot more. It doesn't have that sort of underground aspect of it anymore. It's becoming more mainstream in a lot of countries. And technologically, of course, everything is boosted up, 10 times fold. So people have more access to information. People, they get connected and they collaborate more. So information gets exchanged a lot more easier than what it used to be. Like finding a producer in, 10 years ago in your was not as easy as finding one producer right now. I'm sure you can find 5-6 people into Psytrance production scene within a phone call away, so you can always hook up with your friends, and it's a lot easier to travel, play gigs, and that kind of brings the information to the forefront from the older generation to the newer generation, so that more people get accustomed to it. But it's not, information is only one part of it. My personal opinion is it's not the information that will make the difference. Like, we can pretend that you can transfer everything that you've learned throughout the years into someone that's starting now. The key, I don't think the result can ever be the same, because there is one key factor that cannot be transferred or learned, which is the experience.
Absolutely.
And that experience, it cannot be described, it cannot be passed on. There is no shortcut to experience. You might be good technically, or you might have the information of how to produce a track, but until you actually brand it in your brain and know what you're doing and why you're doing it in such a way, it takes a certain amount of years that, in my opinion, cannot be hijacked, and there is no shortcut from going from A to Z. There's not an easy way. You have to go through certain steps. Of course, you might be able to get gigs a lot more easier, but reaching the top level of production, you're going to need experience that cannot be passed on by any producer or tutorial or sound bank or whatever.
And I think now even more so, because there's so much more competition, for guys who are coming into it for the first time now. There's a lot more producers and stuff like that. So I think, now that the information stage, or the level of information, the playing field has been leveled, now I think the experience factor and the amount of effort and stuff like that has to be boosted to make up for the amount of...
well, yeah, absolutely. It's good that there is such a competition, to be honest, because it kind of keep the level, the minimum level to play an international gig keeps on rising. Like, on the aspect of getting something released is a lot more easier, because there is a lot more labels, a lot more producers. Usually small labels, they can either not afford or approach the big names, because let's face it, big names, they want exposure as much as possible, which at the moment smaller labels cannot offer them. So they tend to focus on the newer producers, which is good, because it gives them an opportunity to sort of get into the industry and start knowing things from the inside, rather than what they heard and what they think what they think about the industry. So I think it's a good opportunity. It's a good opportunity for them, but it also rises the level, as I said, to the minimum level of any production or producer to play the international gigs. And that is good, because there is like a healthy competition. We might also add to that it's not, nowadays, in my opinion at least, it's not the music that actually will define the success of a brand or not. Yes, the music is a big part of it, maybe not the biggest part of it, but at least 40 to 50%, it's down to the music. I have the sort of feeling that the newer generation, due to the vast amounts of music out there, they cannot possibly follow everything. I remember back in our days, we used to get the CDs, and we would actually play them 100 times until we get the next CD. So we sort of studied, quote unquote, the music. We knew all the tracks by heart. We knew the names. We got to listen to a track over and over again, either in a car or parties or whatever. So we sort of, we were into the more musical part of the music. Now, with all the technical information and the technical capabilities of PCs and Macs and what have you, the people tend to consume music, not actually evaluate it as to the same level as what we used to do. So the music comes in and out really fast. Like within a week, a track can get from release level to being old, because there is so much music. People cannot possibly follow all the music out there, and they cannot possibly buy it and have the time needed to appreciate it. So it's just, there's a constant flow of music coming in and out. And from that aspect, I think that there's a big difference between what happens now and what used to happen, back in the days.
That's very true, and I think it's a lot of the older artists are struggling with that. I think the key now to being successful is to always be consistent, to be the artist that the new guys are always talking about, and the way to do that is to just keep releasing stuff constantly. And
consistency is for sure. Consistency in the production level, in the quality is for sure a huge factor into it, but it's not the only one.
Yeah,
there is a difference between being a good producer and being a successful producer.
Absolutely,
it can be day and night. I know a lot of people that are, huge producers as far as the production side per se, like killer tracks, killer productions, but they might not meet the success of other people who are not as good producers as them. So yes, production is one part of it, but I guess what surrounds production, which is the branding and how you promote yourself, and whether you're in a good agency or in a good label, and what connections you have and collaborations, and of course what kind of a personality you are as well, because that also counts in the industry. Make no mistake that everybody knows everybody, so everybody knows who everybody is.
Yeah, I think now also as an artist, you need much more of a balance of everything. You need to have consistent promotion. You need to have good character developed skills. You need to have good production skills. You need to be good with networking and stuff like that. Whereas I think in the past decades, a lot of that stuff was covered by labels and all sorts of stuff like this. And now with all the competition, the labels can't, as an artist, you need to get the label to even recognize you as a consistent artist amongst the other people on the label and stuff like that. So I think it's as much production as it is branding, as it is marketing and promotion. And it's like, as a producer, you kind of have to wear all these hats.
I think. Well, it used to be that you only had to do the production work. Now you have to do everything else on top of the production work. Yeah, you either pay somebody else to do it, whether you have the money, which younger producers naturally they cannot afford it. Bigger producers playing gigs all over the place, yes, they can afford the best masterings. They can pay somebody else to mix the track. They got good agencies behind them to support and promote them. But when you're new into the industry, you actually have to do that all by yourself. So it's a huge investment of time. It's a huge investment of money, and it definitely takes a lot more to break through the average kind of level of artist, to break through and sort of make yourself known. So it's a big investment, and it does take a lot of time to do it. Like as far as labels, I think that nowadays they are more like portals actually for releasing the music. That's why you see people jumping from label to label. I think labels is just the means of getting the music out there. They don't support the same role that they used to have, at least a decade ago. Of course, they will having a good label name behind your brand name can give you something extra or take something out of your brand name. Of course, it does matter, but I think the actual role and the actual power of today's music industry is actually in the agencies more rather than the labels. The labels will support you up to a point because they need to, present the music and have a steady flow of music coming out to the audience. But as far as gigs, I think everybody's out there for himself if he's alone, and B, you have to chase and chase the situations and get into a good agency in order to have the support that you should have from a label, at any given situation. So it's a lot more complicated to be the successful brand than actually being a good producer. So yeah, it's a lot more complicated for the newer producers to actually adapt to that environment and build their brand and everything to that point.
Yeah, I think it's a good learning curve though, and I think in the end it'll make producers more competitive, and it'll make the ones that, for example, I believe that as a creative individual, doing anything creative is just going to make you better at what you love doing. So if you go out and you try paint a picture, it's going to change the way that you look at creating music. Or if you try do photography or something, it's going to change the way that you look at music. And I think as a producer, having to put on all these hats and having to design your own logo and brand yourself and do all these things just makes you changes the way that you perceive the industry. And I think it's very empowering, because certainly somebody can be independent and make it big. You don't really specifically need the labels as much as you did as a vehicle in the previous years, but it's going to be much harder.
Of course. Well, I think the recipe to success is actually, besides the production part, which has to be at a certain level and totally competitive to other producers, you have to elevate your brand name in such a level in order to be profitable for other people. If you don't bring yourself on your own to the position of making money to other people, then you're going to stay, at a certain level, and you're going to be struggling for gigs and fighting over, the leftovers of the big names. Once you do, with your own struggle, with your own investment, with your own patience, with your own technicalities and what have you, when you do elevate your brand name in order to be easily sold to audiences, then doors will start to open. Gigs will start to show. People will approach you. People will come. Because if you're out there and you're able to sell yourself on your own, then it's a good opportunity for agencies and labels to approach you because you're already a ready product. So yeah, it's sometimes producers think that it's all peace, love, unity, respect out there, but unfortunately, the industry is a lot more cruel than what they think. So it's a business. It's a business. Yes, there is all this happy side of it and the way of life and living to the Psytrance world and everything. Yeah, that's fine. But when you start creating music and selling music and actually making money out of it, it sort of becomes a job. And that comes with all its positives and negatives that you have to adapt with in order to be a successful businessman in the field or not. So it's a very thin line, and it's a very cruel process that you have to endure and be consistent with it and patient with it in order to become more successful than actually releasing something or playing one or two gigs.
That's very true. I think it kind of goes back to the reason why I think I'm the most creative early in the morning, because I'll wake up and I won't think about all these difficulties in the industry and stuff. And as midday hits, you start to think, damn, I need to still do this, and I need to contact this person, and this needs to get sorted. And then you start feeling a little bit less creative, and
Yes. The creation part is good, but there is a lot more than the creation part.
You also have a YouTube channel. You've posted a couple of videos. Your tutorials are actually very in-depth.
I'm actually quite new into YouTube. The channel is SounDirective Samples. I started it in order to, as an extra means of promotion for the sample packs and the preset banks. And in the meantime, I also started creating a couple of tutorials. So there is, at the moment, there is only 2 tutorials on my channel. One is for the stereo creation, the bass stereo, how to treat it, how to create it, and how to handle it. And there's another tutorial as far as the kick synthesis and what to look out for when you're creating your kick. These are a couple of subjects that I kind of did in order to help as much as I can from my side the newer producers. I am planning to make more, but I had like a few months of moving into a new house and everything, so I kind of withdrew from all these online tutorials and stuff. So, but I am planning to go back at it again, and I think soon I'm going to throw out a few more tutorials out there. And I hope people find it helpful. And it's not what I present and what most people present in YouTube is not the one and absolute truth of how things are done. A lot of usually in music productions, you can achieve the same results with a lot of different methods. Everybody's doing it a different way. At the end of the day, it's only the result that counts, and people can get information, try it out, see if it fits them, if it fits their workflow and everything, and they can keep it or throw it away. But it's not like a tutorial is the only way of how to do things, and it's the absolute way or the best way, because everybody has a different way of and a different workflow of production. So it's just information, and everybody can see it, evaluate it, and keep it or leave it according to their workflow.
No, well, I think it's important, as the one thing about the sort of accessibility to information is that there's also the ability for the wrong information, it's not so great information to get out there. So I think having guys like yourself who have a rich history in good music, like releases with top labels, to be able to offer people, good in-depth tutorials, but also very easy to understand. I think that's invaluable.
For sure. How the means of how you will pass on the information can really make a difference. Because for more experienced producers, certain technicalities, can, they don't really have to. You don't really have to explain move by move what you're doing. But that's not the point, because the professionals would already know what to do and how to treat it. The point is when you're addressing to newer producers, how you will pass on the information makes a huge difference for them. I do watch in YouTube a lot of videos that sometimes even I have while I know what he's doing, the way of passing on the information in the video might not be as clear for a new producer than for a more experienced producer. So yeah, passing on the information very clearly and step by step, and making the newer producers understand not what they should do, because copying move by move something that you see in a tutorial is one part of it. The point is, do you know why you are doing it in such a way and not some other way? So, okay, there is only 2 videos, but I am trying to adapt into this mentality of passing on information, explaining more why things are done in this way and not another way, and why I personally choose to do it that way. And in both videos, I start by saying that this is not the only way. This is just the way I do it. So I'm sure there is other ways, other producers, top producers doing it a different way. But I'm just presenting my workflow, and I'm hoping that it's understandable enough for the the producers to grasp.
But even in your kick tutorial, you did something, I'm trying to remember, I think it was when you calculated, using the envelope's milliseconds, you calculated on the BPM to figure out the 1/16th. Like for me, I'd always just used loaded LFO tool, okay, it's on the 16th, you know what I mean? But I'd never thought you could just do it with maths without needing to load any extra plugins or something like that. So for me, it was just a little light bulb moment that was like, okay, this is just going to make my life a little bit easier. So like I already know how to synthesize a kick. I've already got my I've already got a bank of kicks. I don't have to ever synthesize one ever again. But it was just like, that's a good idea. And I think even I've had top producers that are like way better than myself, like guys that I look up to that have contacted me to say, thanks for just mentioning this little thing in that video that made me use Serum or whatever differently now. So I think having more videos, even if it's just like random stuff, like not even specific, like in-depth stuff, even just random explorations and stuff. I love that stuff because it inspires everybody. It inspires myself.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of get into the same trap as well. Because we've done a specific workflow, we've worked in a specific workflow for too long. Maybe we sort of follow the same steps all the time, but new information comes out that we might even ignore or not even look at because we're used to doing the same thing on every track. So even for experienced producers watching something from another producer and say, yeah, I never thought of that. Maybe I will try it. So there is information for everyone out there. As I said, no one holds the absolute truth of how things should be. And at the end of the day, it's only the result that counts, not the process. So everybody can just try and see for themselves.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. So, yeah, my live stream the other day, it seemed like quite a few of the people were interested in that sound bank. So I'm definitely keen to have a look at the next one. You also released one recently, just the other day.
Yes, I released one on the 31st of August, which is called Diastasis. It's a Serum bank as well. It's 100 presets, totally custom made, but this one is a bit different than the one that you presented. What you presented, the intrinsic nature one, is Psytrance elements of different sorts, bass lines, atmospheres, pads, synths, LEDs, a bit of everything. This one, I wanted to focus mainly on a part of the track that a lot of producers find it hard to create, and that is the intros.
Even myself.
So everybody's kind of used to starting from the kick and bass and the main break and the melodies and all that. But when it kind of drove back to the intro, they're like, okay, it's a bit boring. I have to build it up. I have to create an atmosphere and all that. So I tend to on this Diastasis bank, I wanted to focus on that part alone. So it's 100 presets that are specifically made for intros. It's all consisted of really dark dystopian, sounds, and the complex enough for just one key. You only need to press one key and just let it play, and it's like all the layers sort of create the whole atmosphere that you need in order to create an intro, or it's sufficient enough to just get you going without any delays in the intro. Of course, other people start from the intro, other people start from the breaks, but when it gets to the intro, at least myself, I always had a problem in creating the atmospheric elements. So this one is mainly focused on that. There is, of course, a YouTube video on my channel, which is all the sounds one by one, with the macros for anyone that is interested to actually listen to the whole preset bank sound by sound. So there is a video out there for all those who are interested and have 1.5 hours to spend in order to check it. And I don't know whether I'm gonna keep on the same sort of mentality of focusing to specific parts. But for now, I think it was something that was needed because, to my experience, there was nothing similar out there. And maybe I will just focus on to more specific parts of the track or more specific elements in my future sound art as well.
I think it's great in the way that, like, for example, I don't know if you work the same. Do you also work backwards? Like, you'll make your main hook and your breaks and stuff first, and then make your intros and outros last?
What I do is start from the peak of the track.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Like what would be considered the peak of the track. So of course, after building kick, bass, rhythmic elements, the groove and everything, then I go to the main melodies, which is going to be like the peak of the track. And then I sort of extend the track to the end and towards the beginning. Usually the beginning, like the intro, is the last thing I'm going to do in the track. And it's the most boring one because you're totally out of the rhythm and you have to like...
Exactly. And that's the great thing about this pack is that, you know, by the time I get to the intro, it's like I just want to put something there because it's...
And get it done.
Exactly, because it's not the part of the track that's going to be heard very often. But it's got to sound good because if somebody's listening to it and it doesn't sound good, they're going to tune out. So you have to concentrate on it, but at the same time, you don't want to end up it destroying the momentum of creating the track because it's not as much of an important part, I think. But being able to kind of
it's not much of it. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So I went through. I've got about 5 or 6 projects that are kind of like almost done. You know that, like almost done. Side of things, and I was just going through them and none of them had an intro, so I was like, let me just try this. Opened each one, put in a long 32 bar and just cycled through the patches, and for each one I found a relevant intro that suited the vibe of the track. So within like an hour I had 6 new intros for 6 tracks that I hadn't had intros yet. So I think having very specific things which you can just browse through like that, it's like, okay, all the intros that I'm going to need are in this folder. Just browse through one until you find one. It's a very cool idea.
That was the approach. That was the purpose of it. That was meant to happen. You know, that's the what I created that for. I'm glad you find useful material for your tracks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I've also seen a lot of guys struggle with is creating the intros. When you listen to stuff on SoundCloud, often it's just starts at the kick and bass. You know, it starts at the main build-up, you know.
It's because that part of the track is never heard in parties.
Yeah.
So all the DJs are never going to play intros, except the first track that they're going to start with, you know. So people tend not to pay that much attention to it. Yet, having said that, for people that do actually listen to the whole track, it can make a whole of a difference, like whether you're going to create the appropriate tension and atmosphere for the track that follows. Like usually an experienced ear, judging only from the quality and complexity of the intro, can know already that this is going to be a good track, you know. Like, of course, people, as I said, you know, they tend to overlook it because DJs are not playing it, but it is as important as the rest of the track because it builds the appropriate atmosphere for what will follow.
And I think especially nowadays where, you know, more than half of the music that gets consumed, even in the dance music genre or in the dance music industry, more than half of the music that gets consumed is streamed, is on Spotify, on YouTube and that kind of thing, where people will put the track on. If they're not caught by the first 15, 20 seconds, they've skipped track, you know.
Yeah.
And so having a good intro is definitely an important aspect, I think.
Yeah, it's as important as having a good kick and bass.
Yeah.
And a snare.
Yeah.
If you get
it's the balance of everything.
Very crucial. Very crucial.
So you've also got sample packs. I saw you've done like a
I also
pack.
at the moment there is like 4 products out there. As I said, the SounDirective started last November, so it's relatively new. There is a lot of products coming out almost every month from now on. But for the time being, there's like 4 products out there. One of it, it's also my first product. It's the Psytrance Creator audio sample pack, which was designed by me. Wanted to make something different as far as a sample pack idea and the sample pack sort of approach. So first of all, that sample pack is like more than 20 gigabytes in size. And that is because my intention with that sample pack was not to give a drag and drop solution to any producer out there, which is the easy way, like going through the samples and just dragging and dropping. I wanted to intrigue the creativity of the producer. And I explain what happens with this sound bag is that every complex sound, whether it's atmospheres or grids or what have you, it's separated in different layers. So you might have like a complex sound, a complex atmosphere, and as a producer, sometimes when I use the other people's sample packs, I kind of liked the sound, but there was an element inside that I didn't like, and there was no way to get rid of it, or I needed something to mix it better, or one of the elements to be quieter, or what have you. And I noticed that it's not possible to do that when everything is in audio. Therefore, I created samples that you can get them as a whole, as a sample, but you also have each of the individual layers within the sound separately. So you can play around, you can combine elements from one sample, from one sound, with elements from another sound and create your own. And I have created that. And all the samples, besides being in complete forms and layered forms, they are also in all the notes. So it doesn't make any difference what kind of a bass node you're going to choose. All the samples are there on every node to help you, create what you like. Because sometimes you like a few samples, but they only exist in 2 or 3 notes in the sample pack. And if you're in a different node, you say, okay, it's really hard to pitch shift it or correct it, and all the problems that come with pitch shifting in the audio versions of it. So my approach was, to intrigue the creative part of the producer and give him the opportunity to combine elements from different sounds and create his own, which gives him the multiplied effect of not getting only a pack of sounds, but being able to create 10 times fold the samples in it. And also he can use the same sample with another layer from another sound and never actually using the same sample in the track. So he can reuse layers and combine them with different layers and create his own samples. So that was the first sort of audio pack that I created. As I said, it's more than 20 gigabytes, and it's available in the SounDirective Gumroad page. And the rest of the products, one is an audio pack from Eli, which is his signature sounds, and it's totally created by him. And that is also in the SounDirective page in Gumroad. And it's basically his creations, his approach, a lot of effects, kicks, basses, the whole classic sample pack. And then the next 2 products is the intrinsic nature, which is for Serum, which you presented in your video, and the new one, which is the Diastasis one, which is the one made for the intros and the dark atmospheric elements. So there is more coming, but at the end of every month, there is going to be a new product from now on. So it's like a really busy period for me.
Cool. That's exciting.
I'm planning. I'm releasing a few sample packs from other artists as well in the upcoming months.
Some packs.
So it's going to be a pretty busy period for me.
Cool. So I see you've also recently built yourself a new studio.
Yes, I
was
have.
Watching you post some stuff about that. It's looking amazing.
Thanks, man. It's the benefit of actually at some point in your life living in your own house. So it gives you the opportunity to actually get a bit extreme on what you're going to do, because it's going to be permanent. Living in apartments and flats, doesn't give you the opportunity to actually build in your dream studio. So, once you have the opportunity to do it in your own place, you kind of go all in, just do it once, do it right, and never bother with it again, because it is one of the most crucial factors in the quality of the sound and the sound of the production. A lot of people tend to think that it's either the monitors or that sound card or this plugin or that, but if you analyze it within your years of career, you will realize that half of your sound is actually the studio acoustic.
Yeah,
no
you're
monitor,
not going to hear
no
how good the
sound
monitors
card.
are without a good studio.
Nothing is going to sound right unless the studio sounds right. So it's I always advise the newer producers to, if you're going to do an investment, let it be that, and then you're going to hear the differences in the monitors and the sound cards and everything. Unless you have a treated room, it doesn't really make a difference.
Cool. So did you build these bass traps and resonators?
I've done everything by myself.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything. This is these ones I did by myself. There is like a huge diffuser, which I also did by myself. That one, and I'll show you on that side, but it's similar on the other side as well. So yeah, everything was built throughout the years through experience, because obviously this is not the first studio that I ever created. So this is like my fourth or fifth one in a decade. So yeah, you kind of learn from the mistakes of the previous ones and you readapt. Of course, room measurements were taken and there was a million of adjustments for where everything needs to be placed. But all in all, I'm really, really happy with the result, and it's a good environment to work with. Because, it kind of kills your creativity if your studio doesn't sound good and you'll move your head a bit then you hear different things. So yeah, it's better to get that out of the way once and for all. It's better to invest the time, invest the money, and get rid of it. And then you're going to be able to focus on your creative aspect.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's something that also recently, I mean, obviously not to the same level. This is like my third studio that I've kind of put together. So it's not on the same level as yours, but I found like I was always, I'd always doubt my mixes and stuff like that, but only once like going all out and spending the time doing it. And it's one of those things where I didn't want to do it because it meant like not being able to produce for 2 weeks or something like that. But I just got to the point where I was like, I wasn't trusting the sound that I was getting anymore. So you kind of just have to do it. And then from that point forward, it's been magic. Yeah,
but you also working in the same studio for too long. You know more or less the studio.
Exactly.
You know your monitor. You're not like new. You know your monitors. You know the acoustics of your studio. You do know how your productions translate to parties and other systems. So you know where your weak spots are and where your strong spots are. So having not having a perfect studio is not the end of the world. You just try to do it to the best of your abilities and your budget, and then you just learn in it and adjust every track according. So, but it's one necessity that you have to adapt at some point. It's not a lot of younger producers. They rush into the synthesizers and this and that, and they try to like build up racks and everything, just for the presentation of it and looking good on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. But the result at the end will speak for itself. So it's not you can just use your laptop or PC within a good treated environment, and you can do miracles. You don't need to get all the fancy stuff straight from the go. You need to know why you need it and if you need it, and then get something.
True.
You have to reach the maximum potential of what you already have, your technical capabilities and knowledge, and then push on to the next level.
I agree. So it's something that I actually ask most of the guys that I have on in these kind of chat things. What are your favorite effects plugins? Like not synths, like effects plugins, because that's something that I don't see talked about very often. Everyone talks about Serum, everyone talks about Phase Plant and the Virus TI, but you never
The
hear people talking
effects.
about effects.
Well, I tend to,
but more like experimental stuff. Like not, I don't want delays and reverbs. Like, what's the stuff that you use to get the crazy sounds? You know,
to get the crazy sounds. You don't need that many tools to get the crazy sounds. You know, I tend to, for sure there is a billion plugins out there that do this or do that and be complicated, but I think that creating, a huge chain of plugins actually can destroy the sound more than what you actually need. So it's okay to put distortions on and saturations on and what have you, but my approach is usually using as less as possible. So I'm trying to do the most creative and complex sort of part within the sound design itself, so I don't destroy the sound on top with plugins. So you won't see me using any crazy plugins. I would usually go for a good delay, a good EQ, a good compressor, a good reverb, and that's it. Like I tend to, throughout a stage in my production
you fix it at the
career.
source, basically.
Sorry?
You fix it at the source. It's something that I've noticed with your
Yes.
presets is they sound, you can put it, you don't even have to EQ it almost. It sounds good, Whereas a lot of the other stuff, you've got to take out a bit of noise, you've got to EQ it a little bit and that kind of thing. So I think it's something that does shine through.
You don't need to use a lot of stuff. It's basically for, let's say, for experimental purposes. Yes, you can just start throwing a huge chain of whatever on it just to see what happens, But when you know how exactly you want the end sound to sound like, most of it you can actually do it within the VST parameters. You can do it within Serum, you can do it in Silent, Phase Plan, whatever. After that, it's just polishing and doing minor details. So you don't really need to throw, a bunch of plugins. It actually destroys the sound more, the initial sound. The more you add on, besides the effect that you're getting, you're also adding noise to it.
Yeah.
So adding a chain of 10 effects, at the end, is it what you really want? I tend to try to be as simplistic as possible for quality reasons as well, but for practical reasons as well. So I did get a period of my production career where I tried to emulate how it would be to work on a console, because there is a huge discussion. I mean, there used to be a huge discussion of whether we should apply analog stuff in the Psytrance world and whether you're going to get the analog color and this and that. And I've put it to the test, and I thought, maybe we'll just, at least in the digital world, as much as possible, emulate the analog racks, So I started opening up. I started treating Cubase as a console, like putting out all the channel strips of this console or that console, just trying to emulate the color. For sure, it's not going to be nothing to the original, having the original console, but you kind of realize how simplistic the approach of a console is comparing to a DAW. You just have a basic EQ, you just have a gate, a compressor, and that's it. So trying to make a Psytrance track only using those made me realize that it can actually be done if you've done the serious work prior to that. So, it's in my experience, as I said, it's only one good reverb, which is from the UAD plugins, which I'm using. I tend to use UAD plugins more than others. Of course, I'm going to use a few tape saturations like the Slate plugins, Slate digital plugins. I'm also using a bit. But I tend to focus more on all the fab filters and the Voxengos and all that. It's within my sort of go-to tools, but I don't try sort of complex stuff on it. I'm trying to focus more on the creation part of it rather than.
So let me rephrase a bit. What's like your favorite compressor and that kind of thing? You would go with Fab Filter or UAD, basically.
For a compressor, okay, the SSLs, even for, the SSL from the Waves is a really good one. It depends. Compressors, okay, it's a huge subject.
Yeah,
you need to know what
we could restart this whole conversation again and just talk about compressors.
Yeah. It's a huge subject. You need to know what tool to use, when to use it, and why to use it. You know, is it going to be for color? Is it going to be, there's so many types of compressors and everything. Usually, I would, for gluing purposes, I would either go to the Cytomic glue or the SSL, the built-in from the Waves. For mastering, I would go to the UAD ones. For EQs, I would definitely go to the Fab Filter ones because it's the most. It really helps me out in the flow. It's really good quality and everything. As far as reverbs, I go with the reverbs in the UADs, but I also use the Black Hole. Which is a really good one. Delays. The Replica is one of my favorite one as far as delays, but also there is tape delays in the UAD section. Let me think. Saturation, I usually either go for. I usually tend to use tape saturation, which I will either use the UAD starter, which produces the results that I want, but also the one from Slate Digital is good. Also, the saturation from Fab Filter is good. The Saturn. So more or less, this is the barriers I'm kind of moving within.
Cool. So yeah,
it's not like any. So it's not like any magic tools you need to. No, there is no magic plugins, that do.
Well, that's cool. That's exactly that kind of answers that I want. Is for people to know that you can do anything with what you've got. You just need to know what you're looking for. You need to train your ear a little bit, and you just need to push yourself. I think those are invaluable things.
Absolutely. So you need to sort of create the ability of knowing how the sound will sound at the end. So just going through presets, or usually presets, because that's where you would create your own sounds. You need to have the ability to understand how much juice can you get out of that sound at the end. So going through the process again and again builds in this technique, this capability of looking forward. So you hear a sound and you don't actually pay attention to the sound itself, but you know that using that part or using that tool, I can make it sound like this or that. So that is something that gets created with experience, of course. And it's the ideal tool so you don't get trapped within the barriers of a sample pack or a preset bank. So you need to look ahead and have the experience to know what you can create out of it rather than consume the sound itself as it is, as a drag and drop means into the track, which can also work a few times, but people know, all the people use the same tools. So in the professional world, using samples as they are, it's not really evaluated as really pro ways of doing things. For the younger producers, it's really tempting, just drag and drop and create the track and get on with it. But in the professional world, everybody knows all the samples by heart. So using samples, especially drum loops and everything, everybody knows all the samples. So it's not considered as professionals as it should be to reach the top levels. So it's okay for starters to build the track, but the more you progress and raise your level within the production scene, you need to start doing sound design by yourself and create your unique color. Of course, it's not the end of the world whether you use one impact here or one riser. We're not talking about the sound, but we're talking about more sounds that you can identify more easily. That it's okay, I know this is from a sample pack, this is a preset. So okay, it's just a good starting point for you to use in the beginning, but generate ideas of your own later on.
Yeah, I agree. But I think also that's why, the power of preset packs as opposed to samples is it allows you to tweak things or learn how it was made and create your own sounds around that and stuff like that. So I generally tend to go towards, I get all the preset packs, but I don't have much commercial sample packs except for like drums and stuff like that. But I'm not so interested in the sample packs, but I find like the presets are super helpful for me.
Absolutely. You always get ideas, and it makes you think in more complex ways. Even for more experienced sound designers, getting someone else's presets can make you realize, look at how he done this preset. So you can sort of learn from techniques and connections and whatever. So it's a learning curve for everybody. So of course, it's a really good tutorial for younger producers. Just get the pack and don't consume the sound, but see the connections. Try to create your own. So yeah, it's a lot more useful than a sample pack, and because it will generate a lot more ideas and a lot more sounds than the number of presets included in the pack to begin with. What I want to chat about with you, but I'm going to ask questions to you, like if you don't mind.
Yeah,
sure. It's a few subjects that don't usually get addressed by more experienced producers. It's like, how easy do you think is for a new producer to actually get into the scene and start playing? What do you think is the material that the sort of the gear that he needs to prepare in order to step in from the bedroom career onto the stage?
Do you mean like physical hardware as in gear, or do you mean
no,
the state of where he is in his career?
What aspects of his creativity, brand releases, whatever, what does he need? What pack of sort of elements he needs to step up from the average, to break through the average barrier and start playing gigs? Because what I'm asking, and a lot of people don't seem to realize it, that releasing doesn't necessarily bring you gigs. You can release numerous tracks and never get a gig. And you can release one and kill yourself playing, every week. So what do you think, in your opinion, makes the crucial difference between being a bedroom sort of quote-unquote producer and start getting out there and playing live?
I think it's a little bit different here in South Africa, because we have a lot of, in the summer scenes, we have a lot of festivals. So, and a lot of the time, the guys are looking for like a new sound or a new name, as like part of the, the whole thing is like they want one headliner from overseas and one brand new name that nobody's ever heard of before, which has become kind of a culture in the local scene, which is very cool. So we will often see guys who are producing 2-3 years. They've got maybe not like as a professional sound as the international guys, but they've got like a bit of a unique sound. The music is high energy. And that's when I start to see guys getting bookings here locally. And then in the next few years, they start to refine the sound into a slightly more professional sound. Even myself, I personally feel like I had bookings and I was playing big festivals long before my music was at a professional level, the way I see it, And I think it helped me craft my music better because I can see how the mix translates onto professional rigs and stuff like that. But I know in Europe it's very different because the festivals are more spread out. So there's like a festival in one country and then another one in another country within this summer period. So I think as, for example, an artist in a specific country in Europe, they'll only see maybe 2-3 big festivals in that country throughout the whole year. Whereas in South Africa, every weekend, the whole of summer, there's a festival in Cape Town, which is the city I live in. So I think there's a lot more exposure here for newer artists.
Do you think that an artist needs sort of to get established in his own country first in order to reach other countries? Or do you think that the brand name to be sort of created, supported, and established in his own country first, and then more doors will open to other countries? Or do you think it's vice versa? That if a guy gets recognized abroad first, that will open a lot more doors and a lot more respect, quote unquote. Will give him a lot more respect and recognition in his own countries. Because why I'm asking is that a lot of people tend to be underestimated in their own countries. Yeah. While, okay, for sure, the branding is a huge aspect of it. You get the big name, he's known, whatever. But I have seen local DJs and local musicians, live acts, actually being the highlight of the party rather than the big name that actually comes from abroad and what everybody's paying for, And I think there is a tendency for local people to underestimate local artists until they find success somewhere abroad, and then there is a totally different approach in their own country as well. Or do you think it's the other way, like being recognized in your own country?
It's a very interesting thing, and I kind of seen it both ways. So a lot of the time, South Africans, I think we've got to, because the scene is very big here, we have parties every weekend, new artists come up very quickly and they get recognized, and it's hard for those artists who have recognition here to get overseas. So, I mean, I've been gigging for over a decade, playing at big festivals, and I've never been overseas. But people in Europe, their first gig overseas will be in South Africa and stuff like that. So it's a weird one. I can't really put my finger on it, but I think it's due to the fact that we just have maybe more producers here, and also more festivals for those producers to come up at.
Mm-hmm. Is it? I mean, I've never played South Africa to be honest, but I know there's quite a hot spot. There used to be quite a hot spot years back. I don't know what the situation is now. I guess it's the same as all over the world. But I think the tendency nowadays is for everybody to sort of go to Brazil first. And once you get to Brazil, then you're going to get a lot more into Europe or South Africa or Australia or wherever you're from. So I also noticed that a lot of people, just because in Brazil, you also have the power of the image, which also translates to the new generation a lot better than the music itself. So a lot of people, yes, they will listen to music, the older generations, the newer generations of party goers will actually consume the music through the videos. So having a powerful image of a huge stage, like jumping, up and down, that will also boost your overall, brand name, and will give you a better force, to sell yourself better in the rest of the world. Having said that, I do find that a lot of producers tend to create music, not that they necessarily like, but that they would more easily sell to that part of the world in order to get the exposure more easily that they need in order to do whatever follows. I don't know, have you noticed that yourself at all, or is it...
Yeah, I've noticed that it's a lot of artists have a secondary project in like a different genre or something, but I'm not sure if it's as much to like pander to a specific crowd as much as it is just exploring something new, because I think as a genre, there is a kind of, at some point we're going to need to look for other subgenres to include to move our sound a little bit further, if you know what I mean. Like a lot of people, obviously I'm probably going to get comments about this again because I bring it up a lot, but like the example of Vinny Vici, the way that he brought aspects of Big Room and that kind of thing into Psytrance accelerated his music career tenfold more than anybody else. And now his Psytrance is now recognized a lot more because of how he's included other subgenres and stuff like that.
Absolutely, it's becoming more. It's getting easier out there. You know, playing Psytrance.
And I think Captain Hook is another one as well. His newer stuff is very much techno influenced. It's a lot more popular than his stuff from before, because now other people are listening who may not have heard Psytrance and stuff.
Maybe because there needs to be some kind of blending. I think the Psytrance, the trance, the techno, they sort of start blending elements of each genre in between them. That also, in reality, what that does is bring something newer to the ears of their consumers, because all these three types of music they are sort of stuck. Okay, there has been cycles and cycles of recycling the same things, the same ideas, a bit different with better production, but yet the core is more or less the same. So bringing elements from other genres, either it's trance or techno or what have you, sort of makes it a bit more interesting and makes it a bit more applicable to a vast number of audiences. And it also brings up more gigs, and that also brings up more consumption, and it brings higher fees, and it brings more success, and so on and so forth. So I think it is good that it's happening, because it showed some kind of progression. A lot of how should I say, Psytrance, really hardcore Psytrance people don't like it, because it sort of dissolves the actual undergroundish style of the music. It becomes either too happy, or it becomes either too hard, or this or whatever. But some people tend to stick to the original sound of Psytrance. Others like it. But I think the general idea of why this is happening is that all these EDM genres sort of got stuck at some point, and maybe they try to mix the crowds, mix the music, make it more widespread, which is more profitable for everybody, for labels, for gigs, for artists, for agencies. There is a whole industry around it. So I think there's positives and negatives to it. And, all in all, it's one period right now that we have to move on and see whether something else will come out of it at the end. Maybe new styles will come out of it. I tend to stick more to the original aspect of it. Myself, personally, also, I haven't evolved my music to that direction intentionally. I tend to be more romantic, you can say, or more conservative in that issue. But I tend to stick to the old school kind of way of doing things and sticking to the original Psytrance. But I have no problem at all, and I totally understand why it is done. And I have no problem at all with artists that they choose from one side to go to the other side, because that brings more gigs and more success and more this and that. So,
and I also think it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, about the agencies. And as an artist, you kind of have to give yourself, you have to make profitability for yourself before people can recognize that. And for example, as myself as an artist, if I have a techno act, a Psytrance live act, a Psytrance DJ act, a chill out act, if I've got 10 acts that I can perform at a festival with, and they only need to pay one flight, that's profitability, you know. So I think a lot of these guys are thinking, okay, to get the tour overseas, I can get 4 gigs with one person, and so I think a lot of them are thinking in that realm of things.
For the organizers. For the organizers, it's definitely more profitable. If you can offer 2 in the price of one, or 3 in the price of one, good enough. Now, what is the line between doing harm to yourself by over appearing in some places, or in a 3-day festival appearing on stage 3 or 4 times? I don't know whether that's good for your overall brand, in total, but it's totally, that definitely gives you more flexibility. And you can also play clubs, you can also play parties, you can play openers, so it's like yes and no. It can benefit you, but I think sticking to something and becoming really good at it, maybe 2 styles, you can also become 2 styles. You can do techno and you can do Psytrance just fine, but I think all in all, keeping an identity for yourself and not selling out, that easily, so that you sort of have a principle behind what you do, and it's not like a job or a profession that you just try to, benefit financially out of it. So, some people.
I totally agree, and that's kind of why I still have a lot of respect for Vinny Vici, because they were like, "This is our sound. We're doing it. We're gonna do it," and they just evolved their sound. And it's not like you see a lot of these guys who they split their, they spread themselves very thin. Now they have 10 acts, like daytime, prog, techno, etc., etc. And I feel like they're not giving any of them their full 100%, and that, like you said, it can end up damaging a brand.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's an industry, man. Like the amount of people that actually are into Psytrance and they actively support Psytrance globally is nothing compared to other genres. So you can compare Psytrance to techno, for example, in actual global numbers. It's huge difference. So as a result, I believe that there is like a maximum limit of fees and gigs that Psytrance can give you. Okay, for sure you can play 3, 4, 5 gigs within a weekend, flying all over the place. But as far as fees, I think there is a ceiling to it, because you cannot get more people to support it by blending other people and going into huge crowds like Tomorrowland, or it's like productions of that sort, which is like uncomparable as far as budget and as far as fees and everything. Getting into those gigs, that's where the actual profits, what the profit is. So I don't blame the people who do it, and if you do it successfully, I think at the end of the day, this is what counts. There is gonna be haters whether you do it or whether you don't. So people who are gonna speak bad about you are gonna speak bad about you either way. So you might as well, do what is best for you, your productions, because the profession of DJ and producer has the age limit as well. How long are you gonna do it? So I don't blame the people who go in it for the money. At the end of the day, do it as best as they can, get as much as they can, and then do something else in their life. It's totally understandable. The whole ethics behind it is there, but it's not the end of the world once you start getting into the industry side of it, and not the ethics part of it, and the whole Psytrance kind of thinking. So both are good, but everything has its limits, and everybody has its positives and negatives. Everybody evaluates that.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself.
So how is the scene there at the moment? Is it like frozen like the rest of the world? I know there is a few countries that actually some things start to happen, whether it's with distancing or whether it's with crowd limit. like specific numbers of people? Is there anything happening in South Africa at the moment?
Not at the moment. We're still on complete 100% lockdown. We kind of had like different levels, like level 5 to level 1, and we're currently on level 2. I think at level 1 they're going to allow gatherings of 50 people. But that being said, there's been a few underground parties that I've seen pictures, people not wearing masks, and it's, if I were to be asked to play at that gig, I'd say no. So yeah, I think I'm going to wait until everything's back to normal before I start getting accepting gigs and stuff again.
Do you think it's going to get back to normal?
Yeah. The way that we're going in South Africa,
like the way it used to be.
Yeah.
Or there's still going to be some remnants of.
I think it'll take some time. It'll take a year or so to kind of get back into the swing of things. But seeing how quickly South Africa reacted, and now we're past the peak and we're slowly kind of getting back into things. Seeing how quickly it happened kind of give me faith into the fact that I think it's going to go back to normal. There obviously might be restrictions. I mean, they've mentioned now international flights have opened for emergency purposes, and within the next few weeks we'll be allowed to fly internationally again, which I think is a huge thing. So yeah, it's looking positive.
Do you think there's gonna be any as far as parties and as far as how parties happen? Do you think there's going to be any leftovers from the whole situation? Do you think the scene will be the same and operate in the same levels as before?
No, I don't think so. But I think that I think this is a thing with business in general. I think businesses were too comfortable for too long, especially in South Africa. I'm going way off topic here, but I mean, here in South Africa, we don't have a retail online situation. Like, you can't really buy stuff online. And now with this whole Corona thing, half of our businesses have closed rather than making an online situation. So it's like, how long has internet been a thing? And how many countries can you buy stuff online easily? You can buy a MIDI controller online, you can buy a microphone or whatever. But it's just not the case here in South Africa, because businesses were overcharging for the brick and mortar thing for too long, and people were just okay with it. And I think those businesses are now like, oh, okay, we need to come up with a viable solution. And the ones that have now come up with viable solutions are going to go further. And I think that's going to be indicative within the scene as well. I think there were a lot of parties that were comfortable for too long. They weren't bringing in international acts, but they were charging the prices for internationals. And the sound systems were bad. There was no engineers. It was,
so there's going to be a readjustment of all fees and prices.
But I think in the long run, it's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, it's gonna clear out a few things. I believe that for sure fees will drop, artist fees will drop, party fees will drop. So because it's gonna be other people are gonna still afraid of it, and there's gonna be a couple of years until they actually go into the parties with the same amount of freedom that they used to do before.
Hopefully we see less of a culture of DJs and artists playing for exposure, because that's something that I've seen also brewing quite a lot before this whole COVID thing. And I think now artists realize we didn't get any help from any relief from any governments or anything. Like, wait, maybe we do need to start thinking for ourselves. Maybe these party organizers that are charging whatever the prices are, maybe they need to start charging those people to play and stuff like that. So hopefully we see a culture of the artists and the DJs charging, how can I say, more of a balance between the two. The ones that are at the top maybe charging a bit less, and the ones that are at the bottom charging something and actually making a living from it. I think that would be...
Yeah, it would be healthier
for ideal, everybody. Let's put it that way.
It wouldn't be profitable for some people, but it would be healthier for the scene and the overall balance of things after all. So let's see. I think the market sooner or later is gonna come into a balance, So,
but I mean, before this whole thing, the scene was going very strong. I know some of the big organizers actually have day jobs. They do this as a side thing and stuff. So obviously, because the promotion and party industry here is so competitive, because it happens almost every weekend, these people, like the organizers, actually do need to have day jobs and stuff like that. So I think it's a positive, because they've been able to shut down the side thing and carry on with other stuff, and hopefully it's gonna open up again. But yeah, there might be less parties, but it probably means that the parties that are happening are gonna have more of a vibe. You know, they're gonna mean a lot more. You know.
Yeah, it will go back to the original vibe of it.
Exactly.
For sure, people will be so eager. You know, first parties, I think that is going to be massive. You know, once they release all the measures and everything, I think the first parties ought to be you know, killer ones. I noticed that some of your videos you have like in your studio, you're also have like a Euro rack there or something.
Yeah.
So
oh, you can't see it. It's in this video.
No, yes, I can't see it, but I have seen it in another video where you show the studio and everything. How how easier or harder it is to actually create stuff there rather than using a DAW or VST instruments? Is it easier? Is it harder? Is it better quality? Is it more unique? How would you characterize it? Because it's a totally different approach into sound creation. To me, it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
A lot harder, because you need to tweak and retweak for hours in order to get something that you might not even use at the end, you know?
I think it's very different. As you know, for myself as a producer, it's very rewarding to step out of the production box and kind of let the machine do its thing, and I'm witnessing it work. So most of the time when I'm playing with my Eurorack, probably 80% of the time, it doesn't end up going ever into a track. It doesn't end up, you know, ever being a sound that I've ever used, but it's just me witnessing a beautiful moment of music being created by a machine.
You're more into the flow. You're like hooked up and totally focused a lot more, because it's actually hands-on. It's like...
Exactly. It becomes less of me creating the music and me witnessing or collaborating with something that creates the music with me. So it's relaxing, because I'm quite indecisive, like when I'm producing. So I'm like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? You know, what is the outcome going to be? And it ended up stressing me out a little bit. Whereas with this, is like you just plug it in. This happens, just kind of let it happen, you know. And if you hadn't pressed record, you've lost that moment, and there's no way of getting it back again. And that in itself is very rewarding, because it breaks you away from the music creation process. And now you're just it's kind of like meditation in a weird, nerdy way.
You're like a channel, like channeling through sort of vibes and sounds or what have you.
But also I'm very much like a problem solver by nature. So if, for example, I'm like, okay, I've got a filter and an envelope. I don't have a sound source, but I want to create a kick. You will like try work out how to create this thing to self-oscillate, to make a kick drum sound and stuff. And doing that is so much more rewarding, I feel, because, you know, everyone can make a kick in hundreds of different VST plugins. But if you've got like a specific thing that's set out to do something, when you break it out of the box and you do something different, it's like, you know, what are the limitations then, you know?
Yes. So it's like you satisfy your creation part of yourself, you know, you satisfy it, you know, it's not, I tend to, I mean, I don't have any Eurorack myself, but I know from other fellow producers that they do have, and, you know, trying to play with them in their studio myself, it was like, it was becoming a nightmare at some point. So I have to, how immediate it is to get the sound of your choice and liking through VSTs and through Euroracks, or starting from any given signal to create a sound and all that. It's a totally different process, but you know, it takes time.
Absolutely. But also it's kind of like forced me to think about creating music differently. Think less about, structure and grid, and to think more about just, the sort of the science side of things, sine waves and harmonics and all that kind of stuff.
Like, when you reach a certain point that you like the sound, do you like back it up, like record it somewhere to have it and then go on create another sound, or this is like a sort of live, let's just spend 3 hours here?
Sometimes yes, most of the time no. It is kind of more like a live thing because, one of the things about it is there's so many parameters involved that you can kind of never make the same thing twice. Also, because a lot of the components are analog, they take time to heat up and stuff. You can almost never make the same thing twice. So,
and there is no recalls or anything.
Exactly. And so, doing something and it kind of like tickles that part of your brain, but that you'll never be able to do that again. It's like this chaotic random thing that is kind of like relaxing, I guess. But a lot of the time what I'll do is, what I enjoy doing is I will just hook the output into OBS and just live stream, do like a patch. It's very cool to create like a full jam session with just a single synth. Have like a kick and a snare, but they all relate to each other's LFOs and envelopes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool.
Is there any other secret gear you're using in your productions that, like, do you have like any special tools that you use yourself?
Not really. I mean, I recently bought the Cyclone Analogic TT303. It's basically a TB303 emulator. I mean, people say that it's the most basic sound ever, and it is. You can do it on 100 of VSTs, but having it hands-on and punching in the steps, I've used that more in tracks than anything else in my studio that I've ever bought. I've owned Nords, I've owned Moogs, I've owned so many different synths, but just this thing, it's such a small little thing, and it costs like so little. It's the classic Psytrance sound, and having it hands-on, I can step sequence it and stuff. It's amazing.
Would you advise to the new users if they feel like they need something like that? Would you advise for it or against it? Like, I mean, like a hardware synthesizer. So yeah, they are created a few tracks, this and that, and they say, okay, if I get the virus or if I get this or that, that's going to boost up my creativity and it's going to, make me better. Would you advise for it or against it? Do you think that a hardware synthesizer would create that much of a difference to a newer producer?
I do, because it kind of teaches you a different mentality. I generally advise against hardware synths that have presets, just because you don't learn that kind of muscle memory and things from it. Obviously yourself coming from a classical musical background, about discipline and practice and that kind of thing. And analog synths teach you a lot about discipline and that kind of thing and muscle memory, which I think you lose out a lot on with a DAW and the conveniences of a DAW. Having to, this specific one doesn't go out of tune. It's got a little automatic tuner built in, but a lot of the synths, analog synths and stuff, you'll have to tune up before you use them and stuff. So it teaches you patience and it teaches you to work within the boundaries of what you've got. And I think those two are very important things as a producer, because, you could have the most complex plugins, Falcon or Phaseplant or whatever, but if you don't know how to use Synth 1, or if you don't know how to use Sylenth, the complex stuff is not going to be any benefit to you. So I do generally recommend very simple, like analog synths, to just play around with, learn those muscle memories, and have fun, most importantly. But I generally evaluate, do they have monitors first? Because that's like, step one is the monitors. If you don't have those, then there's kind of not really much point in having the hands-on gear, because you're not going to hear it. And
yeah, I mean, it's for sure a good thing to learn stuff from, but it's not it's not going to do miracles unless you have the patience to learn it, and of course learn a bunch of other things around it, how to get the best results, the best sounding results out of it, and basically stick with it, stick with the process and learn it, and then you're going to be able to express whatever you have in your mind through it. Otherwise, it's just playing around and experimenting, and see what comes out.
But I find you also, when playing around with these analog synths and stuff, you also learn a lot about gain staging, latency, everything that's important in music production that you don't actually get taught when using VSTs. So I think it's one of the things that's like.
Well, you don't need to know when you're these. It's good to have it. Yeah. It's good as an approach, but with those, you only need to be careful not to pick, unless you get into the hardware world,
But the latency thing has caught me so much. I mean, only since I've started using the Eurorack to actually go in and check all my sounds latencies that are bounced out of VSTs. And something I've noticed is some plugins will actually have like 30, 40 milliseconds before it actually starts rendering. And I didn't check these things before playing around with analog synths, and now it's become a part of my workflow. Just check everything I've recorded in. So, yeah.
That's why, the more you add, the more the initial signal becomes more and more sort of distant from the original one. You get the latencies, you get the noises, you get this and that. That's why I said before that, the shorter amount, the smallest amount possible as far as plugins can do the actual work a lot better than just throwing a bunch of plugins, into the chain. So, of course, everybody, has his own way. At the end of the day, only what comes out of the speakers counts. So it's not like the only truth and the absolute truth.
Too true.
All right.
Awesome.
So how did you think? How was it there? Did you bang?
Yeah, it was good. We got a lot of good information. I think it's this kind of thing, like more opinions and that kind of thing. I think is important. We make the tutorials with all the technical stuff, and a lot of the time it kind of makes it seem like we're these unachievable gods, but it's important for viewers to know that we're humans too. We have normal conversations.
No. Besides that, they also need to know things through a conversation that they can't find anywhere else. As far as insights and opinions of more experienced producers and how things work and how things don't work, sort of clarify a lot of either bullshit ideas they might have or wrong ideas, or they kind of bring them more down to earth, to reality of how things actually are. So I think it's more beneficial for those that will appreciate the opinions. After all, it's only opinions. They don't have to agree with you. So, but giving the information out there, I think, is more helpful than a tutorial.
Yeah.
Tutorial is one thing, but knowing what is what and how things work is another thing. So I think it's more beneficial in the long run for them.
So I think we spoke about some really good stuff.
Yes, we're gonna see in the comments. I hope they have a good response to it, but I think they will.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
Okay. All right, then, Dust. Yeah. Was a real pleasure, man. I guess Likewise. We're going to talk again.
Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to be posting a link to his YouTube channel, as well as where you can buy his preset banks and all sorts of stuff in the description below. So definitely go check that out. See you guys next time. Cheers.